This is an in-house panel wherein we have two team members from Breakthrough. I'd want to invite Ritambhara, who is Deputy Director at Breakthrough looking at the programs, the Deep Transformation Program, and Tribeni, who's Senior Manager at Breakthrough, specifically in the media team. This particular panel essentially is to look at Breakthrough's journey, how we have looked at integrating digital into norms change work. There's been some discussion. We're actually transitioning from norms change to digital, and I just wanted to underscore that. We've broadly looked at what kind of strategies we've been looking at, what kind of frameworks we've been looking at for norms change. What we've also understood over the past few years is that it is essential to look at both on-ground and digital components and bring them together for any kind of sustainable norms change and behavior change related work. The idea of this panel essentially is to pause and reflect on the kind of work Breakthrough has done over the years. Look at how our strategy with respect to behavior change and norms change evolved over the years. What role has digital played over the years, and specifically what kind of strategic shifts we have seen with respect to digital being a component for norms and behavior change interventions. So with this, I would invite my fellow panelists, Ritambhara and Tribeni. Ritambhara, I'd first reach out to you. You've been part of multiple behavior change, norms change programs in Breakthrough, specifically with adolescents, with the youth. You've also looked at how we have used on-ground, how we have used digital components for these programs. I felt it would be very helpful if you could reflect a bit on it. What has been our journey over the years? How have you seen these programs evolve? And specifically, if you could highlight the role of digital, how you've seen the role of digital in these programs evolve over the years. I also want to highlight that if you could draw some kind of light on the fact that when we see that certain kind of shift over the years in terms of the way we are looking at digital, to what extent do you see those changes being like a response to what is happening in the external world, particularly when we look at the people we are working with, people that we're working for, the way they're using digital, the kind of aspirations that they have to use digital. And the second is the way you think our thinking around digital has also evolved over the years. If you could highlight the two in terms of how the two kind of moving together, and if it's like one mirroring the other, if it's that case or something else, if you could talk about that.
It's on. Huh? Thank you, Animesh. So, again, Breakthrough's tryst with the digital has been again iterative, what Animesh was also talking about in his presentation. And to a certain degree, it was also not uncomfortable, but for example, Breakthrough works on the ground with a lot of adolescents, young people, and community members. So one clearly sees how gender norms play out in the real world. And of course, one realizes that access to digital services or access to smartphones or access to anything digital is also highly gendered. So one of the things that often ended up happening or still happens is that within the program team, one would, not to the extent of dismissing digital, but there's always this notion of whether this will work or not. Perhaps it's not going to work at all. So from that to now using digital in a way, and of course Breakthrough had always had strong digital presence, but now to specifically focus on certain behaviors or focus on certain norms, we've been able to sort of figure out what works for whom. Certain kind of material won't work for adolescent people, and also a lot of our conversations on the ground also happen around negotiation, aspiration building, and whether girls can dream or not. So what are the kind of conversations that need to be facilitated on ground, and then what are the kind of conversations that we can push digitally, which can be used as means to negotiate with your family or for discussions within the peer group. So that entire journey has been quite, in fact, I was also thinking that a lot of, now that they've been a few years, I wish some of these insights came earlier, but I guess only when you're implementing something you realize that this works and this doesn't work. So I definitely think from that simplistic understanding of it won't work to how do we make it work given the context that we work in, given the kind of issues we talk about, and sort of then designing those messaging. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Just a follow-up question to you and also to Tribeni on this, that when we look at the way we are thinking about digital at this moment, in our current programs, the way we are looking at digital and on-ground together, and specifically in terms of digital, almost adding a certain kind of an incremental effect to the norms change piece or the behavior change piece, could you, and I'm requesting both of you, could you highlight some of the key strategies that you think that we've been working on in the past 1 year or so, where you think we have successfully looked at digital and that essentially is in line with the larger strategy that we have around digital? Anything that you feel kind of stands out in terms of the way we have, or exemplifies the way we look at digital?
So one of the things that we ended up doing, and this is something that we've been trying to do for every intervention, is to also map behaviors of interest, what in the presentation also we spoke about it, and the norms. Now what that particular exercise sort of helped us was, what are the specific behaviors that we are targeting, norms associated with them, the reference group, the kind of sanctions that these reference groups will put on adolescents or young people. So doing that mapping exercise was extremely helpful. And one example that I can share from that exercise, so for instance, when we talk about girls pursuing higher education or girls negotiating with the families around delay in their marriage, so on and so forth, and then so any conversation on gender norms also then reach a point where we are talking about sexuality, or we are talking about agency, mobility, and all of those things. So we also realized in that exercise that some of it can be facilitated in the community by breakthrough facilitators through modules, but there are certain aspects that we may not be able to communicate in a community setting, or we may not be able to initiate conversations around it. And for us, the digital aspect sort of helped us to initiate conversations on good character or on aspects of dealing marriage, for instance, or aspects of studying further. So these videos, these specific videos, and Tribeni will talk about the page and the videos in a lot more detail, but those videos then helped us initiate those conversations. And of course, these conversations, even with the videos, were facilitated by the on-ground team.
Thank you, Ritambhara. I would like to step back a little and share how at Breakthrough we look at media and digital and also engaging with young people. I think while we were doing the norms diagnostic study, one of the important activities that we really wanted to do is understand the young people, right? And one of our strategy in terms of taking the media industry strategy is to reach people where they are. So platforms like Instagram and YouTube are really relevant for our young people, especially from UP, which is our intervention areas. While we were doing the FGDs on the ground, with the young people, and there are several FGTs we have done before we enrolled the program, both on ground and digital. One of the insight that has also come out is young girls, especially from our community intervention areas. Access is also like, it's not a homogeneous understanding of access. So when we say access, we assume that, okay, people have access. But it's only when we have done the FGDs, we got to know how does access also plays out within families. So we have realized that many girls, they share, mobile devices with their mothers. And this also comes from how young girls are heavily, monitored and surveilled in terms of their uses or their presence on the internet, which also then limits their digital behavior on the internet. And we have seen from our past campaign that young girls, they try not to, how they behave in an offline space. They try to restrict themselves in terms of, let's say, liking a post or sharing a post, which is when we realized that beyond on-ground interaction and having a page, it's very important for us to also then reach out these youth or this cohort where they're able to, interact privately. Maybe they're not able to interact that openly in the public platform, right? Because of certain stigma, because of certain fear of judgment, right? So that was one, revelation, for us to also, take this program ahead, even on digital. And in the current learning grant, I think so one remarkable thing that really struck me is how we were able to build the Datali digital initiative. It's called Datali by Breakthrough. It's a digital initiative focused mainly around building, creating awareness and building narratives around young women's economic empowerment. So while setting up a page is one thing, but how do we also then create mindful engagement with the cohort who are really the life is on digital, right? And so much has taken over in how they take decisions, or how, even to an extent, what they think, what they, who should they interact with, is driven by digital behaviors and characters. So for us, one way to figure out as to how to engage the young people. Is it just mindfully, creating content from the page, but where do they also have that connect? Where do they also have that realistic sort of alternate narratives for them, right? This is where we came together and see that it's very important for us to also engage with influencers, content creators, and their pivotal role in also building those narratives or shifting narratives, right? So we have done an extensive exercise with the young people to understand who do they, follow on the internet, and also the reason behind following those specific, influencers. This helped us actually take forward the messaging on the ground, and in fact, influencers has come back to us saying that, the collaboration has really, helped them increase their follower base. Now, of course, that's number, right? That's, when we talk about impact, we talk about, that's a very easy way to look at numbers or look at impact. But another thing they have also shared is that they are able to have those mindful conversations, meaningful conversations, even within their follower base, which I feel like it's a very win-win situation when we talk about success metrics, when we talk about, who do we are, beyond this primary stakeholder, how we are also able to bring in shift even within those groups. These are certain areas I wanted to just share. Thank you.
Thanks, Tribeni. You talked about the need for engaging the youth and why it is important not just to create a page, but also to create a mechanism where you can engage deeply with your community on a regular basis. At the same time, you also mentioned about some of the practical challenges that we faced, and the major one being the access to smartphones. You also talked about, and that's more like a normative issue, wherein a lot of young women found it difficult to engage with the content, and that was particularly because of the fear of what the community would think about them. I would want to have a more detailed view, or if you could delve a little deeper into specifically around this aspect, that when we envisioned a program like this, the idea was that there is an on-ground piece and then you top it up with a digital layer. And one thing which is always a little difficult or challenging is that how do you integrate a digital layer on top of something which is already existing? Just from that angle, if you could talk about what have been our learnings, specifically in terms of bringing the two together. And when I say bringing the two together, it is also in terms of when we talk about our community, whether they are able to register that whatever interactions or engagement that they're having from the on-ground program and from the digital, they're both part of one coherent program. Essentially that is there alignment in the mind of our community, and what has been our experience around that? How do you think, where did we start from and where we are right now? Are there any learnings around that?
Yeah. So when we envisioned the program initially around young women's economic empowerment, we also went within, with this page, also the space for learning, for us to also see how do we also evolve over the course of the program. Like, we didn't set certain things that, okay, this will really work with our audience. For example, let's say even with the digital, even with the page, we had some numbers in mind, right? We would definitely wanted to reach to a certain point where we are able to build that community. But for us, I think even for on ground and digital, it has been an evolving and learning, relearning process for us. Something that we might have considered really will work. We went with the assumption that will work. Especially, I can share an example of how we wanted to also track real-time data, by engaging with the youth through a chatbot. There was so much excitement even within the organization that, okay, we'll try to explore something new with the given audience. But eventually, with how something of this sort was something new for the organization, and even in terms of the young people, this was first time we wanted to try out with them. But eventually, we realized that because access is, of course, that's one of the challenges for sure. But how do we also mindfully create messaging around the issue so that young people are not they don't get overwhelmed with the messaging, right? So we tried doing that, but there are certain learnings which we have, we would like to take it ahead in maybe not this learning grant, maybe some other grant, because when we say young people, they're not a homogeneous group, young people, let's say, we generally engage with 18 to 24. So how a 18 to 21 group might behave very differently to 21 to 24 group. So through the chatbot, I think there were some pitfalls in terms of not being able to capitalize on a robust platform that we really wanted to roll it out. This was one, which we really thought, it's a learning for us, especially while engaging with the youth. And even though there are, like, we do ensure that the digital content that we create or that goes under the platforms are being taken to on ground or facilitated on ground in on-ground sessions or with the youth sessions. For us, it hasn't been a natural progress in terms of building that connect. There were a lot of times where it needs certain reiterations, reinforcement on the ground, and likewise on digital. And see, like, what should be prioritized in on-ground sessions vis-a-vis, on digital. So the behaviors that we have initially mapped out for on-ground vis-a-vis the digital, we do, like, they complement each other. It's not like, we take forward a certain behavior, it's a sustained, engagement on the digital platform. So that's where the on-ground and offline come together in terms of also see, like, is there any space to also reiterate or iterate the messages that we are, taking to the ground? So, yeah.
Thanks, Tribeni. What I particularly draw from what you mentioned was the need for us to ensure that they do work in tandem. And it is easier said than done, that when you have two major components of a program and you're operating at a fairly decent scale, how do you ensure the two talk to each other? Not just in the boardroom where you're defining the strategies, but also on the ground when the two pieces are being implemented.
So, of course, right now sitting here, one is slightly more confident about what we ended up doing, but it took a long time to work on these challenges. And the other thing is, what really worked for us was having a facilitator on ground to engage with that material. But what tends to happen is a lot of our facilitators, in fact, all of our facilitators also belong to the same community that they're working in. So access is also an issue over there. But how do you continuously reinforce the same messages, what you're normally talking about in a group setting regarding aspiration building and girls being able to do whatever they want to do, and then showing them those videos where an influencer that they follow is also talking about the same thing was definitely helpful for us. So in that way, a lot of our digital content, and please do subscribe to I hope you subscribe to the Breakthrough page, but do follow Detali. It has a lot of content on girls negotiating and how siblings can help each other to negotiate, how girls can have a conversation with parents around access, mobility. So it's a curated page, and that after a point became quite important, and that's been a big learning, that how do you get insights from the ground and then create messaging exactly around those things. And perhaps there are some conversations I can have in a group with my peers, and then there are some conversations I use that video then to initiate.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ritambhara, for mentioning this. What I essentially draw from this is that we do understand that access is an issue, and that will always affect digital interventions. So that is one. The other point that you mentioned, very important one, that the facilitators who we work with, we definitely build their capacities. But at the same time, one thing that we cannot really forget is that they're also coming from the same communities, and they're also, to a certain extent, they and other people are governed by the same gender norms, larger social norms that we are essentially trying to work on. Having said that, what is important, and I think that is what you also highlighted, is that how do you accept these realities? These essentially are constants, that when you enter a program, you know that this is the context that you're operating in, where the access will be low, where the norms will be prevalent, will be strong, and they'll affect everybody who's in that community. But then how do you improvise, and how do you build something over these constants? And I think that is something which both of you also alluded to, that how once the initial period of intervention went, and how there were norm diagnostic studies, the baseline studies that were done, and how these realities were particularly looked at. And then how did we improvise in terms of building over some of these aspects which are already there? That I think brings me to the most exciting part, that how do we look at the next 9 months for something like this, wherein we have got so much learnings in terms of what has really worked for us, where all did we get stopped, and where all did we improvise. So keeping in consideration what the constants were, we improvised and created something new. We understood that the access to smartphones was an issue, but at the same time, we have thought of creating alternate platforms of getting youth, of engaging with them. So I just wanted for the audience, if you, both of you could talk about how do the next 6 months look like, and if you could particularly focus on specific interventions that you think have been designed, specific ones that you're actually looking forward to, wherein you think we've been able to circumvent the challenges that we just spoke about.
How do we see the next 6 months? 9 months, you say, right? That's a really tough question. But what is really exciting for us also, for both from on ground and the still, layering. One of the things that we have been also doing since last year is beyond just relying on the larger evaluation of the program, what we have been also being able to sustainably hold on to is consistently monitor the media component of it, especially the content that goes out on the digital, on the Data.ly platform. And these are in-depth interviews with the participants from our intervention areas. And to be in those interviews is really it's really an unlearning for us, even though we are into the program, even though we continuously think about the program or the messaging or the connection that we need to build. I think some of the insights, like how young girls are using the digital content to then take it ahead with their parents to negotiate for their studies, for their careers, even to move out from their house, right? So insights like this, these, and there are also insights where this one male participant, I forgot his name, and for previously I would not also quote his name. He shared how he and this was specifically content that was focused on male participant. He took that reel and so he started sharing with his friends who were ideally initially they were really not not the type who would come to a session, that talks about young women's aspiration, dreams, right? But eventually he had also shared that he were able to convince them to join those youth sessions, to join those community mobilization sessions. So that was something really so insights like these, we won't get these insights on a digital platform, or especially with content. That's the challenge. So it's for us, it's very important. Other than disseminating or engaging on the digital platform, it's important to continuously monitor the content, and how and we also, these insights help us feed into the larger strategy, larger content strategy, which then we build on in the next phase. One of the really exciting, thing, sorry for using a thing, but we really want to explore this year is, we know that, okay, influencer-led content are really working for us. It's resonating with the audience. They're able to, see that alternative narrative, or see that, alternate choices they can have, right? But what has been also interesting for us is that, even our in-house content and the facilitators that Ritambhara just mentioned, they also fall within this age group, right? 18 to 24. So it's also an aspiration building for them, right? And they are a reference point for, for a young people on the ground. So there is a strong likelihood and also a strong interest of our facilitators in creating content, because they are the immediate reference point for our young people beyond just influencers and content creators. I think this is something we will really explore in the next phase in terms of how does an influencer-led content vis-a-vis in-house content, which are a really direct reference points, like our facilitators, would pan out in terms of taking the message forward around women's economic empowerment. Yeah.
Thanks, Ritambhara.
So one of the things that, one of the biggest learnings in the last 3 years has definitely been how digital can't be just looked at from a scale point of view, especially when you're engaging on issues of gender, you're engaging with issues of girls getting married, early marriage, or them not being able to go to school, or the whole notion around how morality is, how girls are seen as a vessel for families' honor and all of these things. So to engage with these issues, digital alone or creating content for consumption is not definitely something that will not work. But if that content is facilitated by people on the ground and there is a constant conversation amongst peer groups or with the families, that's where that has been one of the biggest learnings, because digital ki dunya is also very aspirational. It presents you with role models, or it presents you with situations that you don't think exist. So when you're offered a script which is very different from what you're used to in your day-to-day life, it does instill a sense of confidence, or it does instill a sense of that I can also do it if this person can do it. So keeping in mind all of these aspects where the content is relatable, it is being reinforced by on-ground programmatic activities as well. The same kind of conversations are happening with community members. That's what sort of going forward one will continue doing.
Thank you, Ritambhara. Thank you so much for being able to share such rich experiences and learnings from the program. And what I really liked was the way both of you were so candid about what has our experience been on this particular journey of including or integrating digital into behavior and norms change programs. And just with, as in case of any other program, and specifically when you're trying something new, certain things are bound to work well, certain things are may not work so well, but the idea is for us to create spaces where we can reflect periodically, look at what things have not worked and why they have not worked, and then build over them. And one thing particularly that I have learned over the last few years, specifically on such interventions, is that how nimble you can be in terms of whatever that you're doing, right from building your strategy, right from implementing something, or even in terms of the way you're looking at the research or evaluation for a project like this, where at one point of time you would have certain assumptions before you start the project, but 6 months down the line, majority of those or a significant portion of those assumptions might not be true when you hit the field, when you realize or interact with the community. So what then is important is that how open you are to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch and build over what you've already done. And I think that is something which is one thing that I am particularly drawing from this particular conversation and also from the association on this particular project. Before we open it up for questions, I also wanted to share one thing specifically around evaluation. And when you look at evaluating an intervention which has a significant digital component, it has its own set of challenges. One is that digital components being part or being or playing a significant part of an intervention is something which is fairly new. So in general, you would have fairly limited literature with respect to what methodologies would work, what approaches would work, when compared with slightly more conventional, only on-ground kind of programs. So that in itself is a certain kind of limitation. You do not have that kind of literature that you can fall back on or get influenced from. The other is that a lot of times you're trying things for the first time, both in terms of strategy, in terms of implementation, and it is bound that certain things will not work. In this case, what I personally felt was that when you create something like a theory of change, when you create a certain log frame, it is important to realize that these are dynamic documents. These are not documents that you create once and just forget about them. So you have to constantly keep referring back to them, and if required, keep making changes to them. Because as you move along, you would also realize that some of the things that you had thought of at the beginning, the assumptions, do not hold true. And hence, you are bound to make changes to the pathways to change that you had thought of, or the kind of changes that you had anticipated. Revise your targets if needed, because that is how things are, particularly when you look at what is coming out from your field experience, from your research experience. So I think broadly, one thing with respect to evaluation, which I wanted to share with everyone, was that for an intervention like this, particularly where there's a digital piece, I think it's always important to be as nimble as possible, document whatever that is being done, what are learnings you're getting, and then keep incorporating them, keep building over them. We'll stop here, and we'll invite questions from the audience.
Good morning. My name is Nandini. I'm from IT for Change. And it was a very fascinating and open conversation. I just wanted to say that, Ritambhara, what you mentioned about content creation not being the focus, and the entire idea of facilitated use cultures to combine the digital and traditional methodologies that we know to transform gender relations, that really resonated with me. I just had one question though, that at the same time you also mentioned that in addition to these deep change strategies, it may be possible to use, let us say, other looser strategies of using social media influencers and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about what are some specific ways in which you have combined these two strategies? Could you share a little bit more detail?
Can you say more? I think it helped me understand when you say, can you repeat the last part of your question?
Yeah, I just want to say that, there are also social media campaign or influence strategies. Like you said, maybe it's possible to use influencers to build scripts about how, we must work on, or women's economic empowerment is a good thing. For example, that's a specific point you mentioned. I just want to know, when as organizations, we struggle with the fact that when we invest in building social media type campaigns, it's very often to create the loop of building them back into the community due to the access level challenges. So how is it that you do this in your own work at Breakthrough, and how do you separate these two layers of wider work on social media campaigns and in-depth work in communities?
So, in fact, so a few weeks back, there was a discussion in the office that when you start a campaign, so Detali, whether that campaign is important or whether that social media, focusing on that social media influencer is important, or whether the messaging is important. So there's always that, it's not a tussle, but of course, as a part of the program strategy, you've come up with the page. The idea is to talk about that page in the community. The idea is for the young people to engage with the content on that page. So of course, that aspect is there. But on ground, it may not translate into exactly young people liking that page or engaging with that page directly. So they may know what the content was. They may use that content to negotiate with their family. They know the influencer. They know what happened in the video, but they may not necessarily be able to correlate the two. So in this particular case, the idea is whether the messaging is more important and facilitating that message is more important than to sort of, this is something that we are struggling with. We are having discussions around it, but yeah, this is, that influencer is not important, but how they're engaging with the message is what one would ideally want to do. Yeah, like it doesn't matter who's communicating it as long as you have a different script where things don't work in the same way as they work around you.
Thank you for asking that question, Nandini. Nandini, right? Sorry. So one of the strategy that we have also strategically thought, how to also bring in the on ground and digital and not look like, totally different, messaging going out on both the, platforms is also having digital touch points. We just recently, brought in the young, all the participants, all from our intervention areas. And we brought in the influencers who they have been, seeing on the page or in a form of digital content, right, in reels, right? The idea of also, bringing together them on a, on one platform is to also build that connect, right? They were able to engage with the influencers they have been seeing for months now, right? So that was one of the first digital touch points we tried doing this year recently, and we have more such digital touch points which we think that it will enhance what we have been talking on the ground and digital also confluence of both of it. So I hope that answers your questions. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Shrestha. I am heading Shellcopter Academy, which is a platform to teach content creation to Northeastern women using AI. So coming to my question, so I was wondering that Breakthrough might be creating digital content to target a particular gender norm, right? But at the same time, a person viewing that content might find existing content which will contradict the gender norm in the digital space. So when you're evaluating how that that gender norm change is taking place, how do you take that into consideration, because there is always something to contradict what you're trying to teach, right? So that, yeah.
Just a clarification, when you say that there's already some content that contradicts that particular norms change, do you mean on the internet that apart from what we are creating, there's other content in the space which might not be in line with the kind of norms change we want?
Like,
right.
Yes.
All right. So I think maybe I'll take it up. In terms of evaluations, the broader rule is that you always have some kind of a control group, have a counterfactual. And I'll come to the limitation to this kind of a design for a digital intervention is that you have one group which would not be exposed to your content, but they would be exposed to all the other things that is happening in the world. Similarly, your target groups that you're essentially working with, they're getting exposed to, of course, what is happening around the world, but also to your own content. And then you look at the difference and compare what kind of results do you see. But the challenge with digital interventions, and particularly when there are two layers, there's an on-ground component and then there's a digital layer also, that is the problem that you usually face in evaluations, wherein it is very difficult to control or create any kind of guardrails to ensure that our content is not going to the control group, unless and until you're doing it in a very, very sophisticated lab setting, which of course we cannot really do in a regular program setting. So that's also been our learning in terms of the way we have looked at this particular project and the way we have looked at the evaluation and what evidence actually do we need for a project like this? The initial idea was to have two groups. One group which is only exposed to the on-ground piece, which is essentially regular work that we've been doing, and have another group which gets exposed to on-ground plus digital, so that you're able to get the incremental effect of the digital piece. But the challenge is that it's also easier said than done. That you, again, when you say that this particular group will only be exposed to on-ground and not the digital, that really doesn't happen, particularly when you're working in a geography where the spillover is fairly common. So what we have realized is that instead of specifically looking at the additional or the incremental effect of the digital, it would be essential for us to look at this project in totality. I think there's been some kind of reflection at our end also, that do we really want to see the incremental effect of the digital or not? Because for us, when we talk about this project, we do not want to see this as two different components. For us, this is one project wherein the two come together. And hence, it is essential for us to look at what kind of effects do we see for people who've been exposed to the digital component, but have also undergone the on-ground piece that we regularly do. And also the third layer, where the on-ground teams have facilitated exposure to the digital piece. So we do look at like a baseline, midline, and an endline kind of a model, wherein we go to a particular group of individuals who've gone through all the three layers, and then track what kind of shifts do we see specifically around the key behaviors of interest, and then see what kind of changes do we see as the program gets more intense, rather than kind of looking at specific or effect of digital in isolation and the on-ground in isolation. Because for us, the program is one. We want the two to come together.
But it's still, what I understand, it's very difficult to say that a particular group will not be watching. I mean, you might think that your control group, might not be, how do I say it? I mean, you're thinking that you are not showing them your digital content, but you can't really control that because it is digital content, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and that is the reason we moved away from an experimental design. So essentially, there will be no control in this case. So we'd be looking at same set of audience who've gone through 3 different layers of intervention and at 3 different points of time. So that as the intervention gets more intense, you're able to track what kind of changes are happening, but you do not necessarily compare it with a control group, because that essentially is not possible in a program like this.
thank you.
And also, Shrishta, the messaging that you're talking about, that anyways happens. So not just that messaging, but generally what you hear from the community, what you hear from your elders. So that messaging is constantly going to be there, but with facilitation and the reason why one says that digital content not just for consumption, but a little more intentional and facilitated. So you also end up talking about those negative messages as well. So there is a conversation around, I remember when we were doing these workshops in UP, there was this conversation around blue drum or women killing their husbands and so on and so forth. So the idea was to also keep some time to have a conversation around all of these messages as well, and what it means to be at the receiving end of those messages, how we unpack them. And then also with our digital content to provide another script as well. So yeah, because negative messaging is, that's the baseline. Yeah, you'll constantly hear a no, or you'll constantly hear that this can't be done.
Well, thank you for this very thought-provoking morning. I'm Anupa Mahuja. I work for Swat Talim currently, and I hold my hat for decades of work in NCRT, which from where I superannuated. Coming to my question, my comment really. Thoroughly enjoyed, I repeat. And I like that even when you're answering, I can gather you're reflecting. So that process goes on. And from that point of view, I just urge you to think about the entire population we are talking about. which includes those who are marginalized by nothing but birth. Okay, I'm born in a family which is poor, so I carry on. Even at the age of 18, I am a different girl as compared to a rich families, a girl belonging to a rich family. I'm also talking about those who cannot hear as well as others, cannot see as well as others, cannot understand what we're talking about, and reaching out to them. Maybe not the next 6 months or 9 months, but maybe 18 months from now. I just want you to think about how we could even, what should be the content? What alteration do we need to do to reach out to all? And actually all, without leaving anyone behind. That would be, and to be doing it in the subtle manner, as we are talking of online and offline, the same about all population. Not saying, here is something for you, here is, that defeats the entire purpose. That would be also a challenge to take up maybe for you and to see what comes out of it. Because I think that's something we need to constantly think about, because we're leaving a large population who happen to be, needless to say, not talked about. And I'm saying this after 80 years of independent India. And it hurts. It hurts deeply, because we should by now have been thinking about digital for all. Not digital for just a few. I mean, it's not that we haven't moved on. The fact that we are having sign language being communicated is not something that I would have seen 20 years ago. So it's not that the glass is totally empty, but I want it to be overflowing like others here. And therefore, I ask this question. Thank you. Yeah, what's your plan? I mean, I know there is no answer right now, but do you think it's something that you would like to put your hands in this pie? And if so, how? Maybe some just, it's just that one needs to flag it for oneself.
Right, no, absolutely. And this is something that we often end up discussing in the program team and within the leadership team as well, that how, but it's again, like I let my colleagues also weigh in, but I don't have a response to, yeah, it is a dilemma that one lives with.
Anything from the field that you may have seen, would you like to share?
So one of the, and that's where I think I've been harping on content facilitation. So this is something we do talk about in a workshop setting, which is slightly more intimate, which is slightly more, which gives you a space to reflect, which opens up space to talk about your own marginality. So this is something that one does end up discussing, but the method in which one engages is actually writing, reading, seeing, and not taking necessarily into account the cognitive abilities. Interestingly, I used to work for an organization that works on education. I used to work with a lot of young adolescents on their, wow, I'm forgetting, on their, so I used to work for Pratham, and used to work with a lot of young adolescents. And one thing that I realized was, of course, people are talking about learning levels, and people are talking about whether they know maths, whether they know science. But one of the things that I struggled with was that at particular age, when you're discovering yourself, there are so many issues around gender, there are so many issues around sexuality, then what happens to those? And that made me sort of switch. So that's one thing that one has been able to work on for the last 10 years, where marginality, purely in terms of gender, one has been able to talk about, but then there are these other aspects that, and it's not that we'll have a phase where we'll talk about disability, it's not that we'll have a phase where we'll talk about something else. They'll go hand in hand, and we do have a lot of young people in classrooms who struggle with writing, or who struggle to speak, and this is something we do discuss about, but haven't come to a solution or an answer. Yeah.
Thanks, Ritambhara. Yeah, sure.
Just adding to what Ritambhara already spoke about and to answering, accessibility is like an ever-evolving subject even for us, right? And especially with digital, given how the access already like the panel has spoken about. But some of the thing that we do try, especially to do with the content part of the digital, is we do try to add alt text with every content that goes out on social media, especially on Instagram, given that the platform itself allows that provision. We also ensure, because currently the age group that we are working with and the locality that we are working with is primarily UP, we ensure the language is something that they are comfortable with. Even though most of the teams are Hindi, like, English speaking, we ensure that we have connection with our on-ground team, and we are curating content that are localized, rooted in their cultural context. And even the social media influencers that we onboard, we ensure that the captions that they put out have like alt text, have like subtitles go on all the videos that are going. So these are some of the tools that are already the platform provides that we try to leverage on, but it is something that we do try to kind of struggle. And sometimes even after adding all these tools, we do miss out on few people and on certain categories that we would want to reach out. But these are certain limitations. And again, because we are speaking about digital platforms, few platforms allow these tools quite intently as how the platforms are designed. But even still now, there are platforms which does not have these tools. So, especially while talking about digital, there is that aspect that we have to think about what is the limitation and how far we can go, but also play around with those limitations and ensure that there is as much accessibility and as much inclusivity that we can provide in the content that we are creating especially.
Thanks, Ipti, for highlighting the measures that we're taking at this moment and also making us realize the ground that we still need to cover. Thank you so much. The sense I have is that we'll have to close the panel, unfortunately. We'll have to break for lunch. But thank you so much for joining us for this panel. And I'd again want to thank my fellow panelists, Ritambhara and Tribeni, for sharing such rich information from the program, and specifically rich learnings, and also sharing in such a candid manner. Really, thank you so much for this. Thank you.